climate change is the biggest issues the biggest issue we have, and we have to fix it, and we can fix it.
This podcast is a product of Vive, where we unlock sustainable businesses. Produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partners in early stage venture building.
Hi, and welcome to Business as Unusual. I'm Sara Fossum, the founder of Vive, and for the past 10 years, I've been working and learning in the field of sustainable business. Along the way, I've had so many honest and thought-provoking conversations with so many people across the industries, both about the real challenges that they experience within this space, but also about the huge opportunity and that they can get when they manage to encompass and embed sustainability in the right way. But the issue is that too often sustainability is treated as a compliance issue and something that you have to do, and rather than something that can actually create value. But when it is approached the right way, sustainability can really drive optimization, reduce risk, and open up entirely new ways of thinking about value, both economically, socially, and environmentally. And that is what this podcast is about. So Business as Unusual is a space to explore how we can rethink business and to build companies that make sense for the long run. And we'll talk to a lot of people with a range of perspective who are navigating within this space, trying to make change. And today I am lucky to have Frode Hvattum joining. Frode and I met at an S-Hub event last year. And he has been working within this field of sustainable business for a long time across a lot of different industries. So I am super excited and I'm looking forward to hear your thoughts and hear your experiences that you've had throughout your career. But first, welcome, Frode.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, speak to you again.
Thank you, and likewise. And I thought to start off, I'm just very eager to hear sustainable business and sustainability. Is that something that you've always knew that you're going to work within, or how did your journey kind of go in this direction? How did you start working within this space?
Yeah. It is, I think, as for many that work in sustainability, it's kind of personal experience, sometimes at least, that kind of got them into the field, especially when they go so deep and dedicated as I think both of us have. So for me, I didn't start at all. I was a lazy, happy kid growing up. Then I went at university at Switzerland, studied finance and strategy, went into strategy consulting, helping banks and insurance companies in the German space, especially Switzerland and Germany, to strive, either increase revenues or cut costs. And then I was like, understanding that what I was interesting as a day-to-day perspective, but it didn't really mean anything for me. And I guess I'm actually a purpose-driven person. I just didn't know it. So I had kind of a personal crisis when I was 30 years old. I went to Sri Lanka after tsunami, and I had a year where I worked as a volunteer, as a consultant, but in a voluntary kind of way, to support the south part of Sri Lanka to build themselves up again after the big hit that tsunami had. And I understood I needed some kind of a job like that for some time. And when I did that, I got so hugely engaged, and I found a lot of energy because I did something that meant understanding some issues in society. And I worked as a business consultant, to help fix that. And that is just so purposeful. That is fun. That gave me energy. So when then I quit my old job at Accenture. I started writing my own book, just like getting my head straight. I want to do something in this space. And then when I just started understanding I want to do something in this space, I read a lot about climate change. And I felt like, the climate change is the biggest issues the biggest issue we have, and we have to fix it, and we can fix it. And then that's kind of got me rolling. And then I had the opportunity to get a job working on it. And since then I've been kind of in that space, strategy and sustainability, change. It's been good fun, challenging, but good fun.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And you also wrote your own book? as
Oh
well?
yeah, well that was this book was never published.
Okay.
That everybody should appreciate. I
Yeah.
basically wrote. I think it was called how to be happy,
Oh,
or how to work with the purpose of be happy or something. I just needed to write out what I personally detected, understood when I was 30 years old in Sri Lanka. That a lot of people like you, I guess, understand a lot earlier. So it just got me. So it was more of a own therapy than something I think interesting for people to read. So I have never published that book.
wow. Do you have any like good insights? Like if you were to kind of draw out a few like the main message that you got from writing this book? I think it's super interesting, yeah, and kind of linking this back to sustainable business actually because um like you said, this is also how you realized and started working towards this. And it's kind of an inner journey in a way, and
Yeah.
realizing how purpose driven approaches to life and to work as well is super important. So I would love to read the book.
I'm not sure if you would, but the I think the thoughts behind it was not to could be interesting, and I think at least the two things I remember and think about is what we discussed now, like the personal touch, right? That within a lot of people there is some kind of a eagerness to help. To have a role that helps people to help society, right? And we
Mm,
sometimes lose that when going into the rabbit, going into whatever everybody else is doing, either it's fixing your house or making your career or getting money or whatever. And that's like, but within people, that's what I noticed when I work with people. There's everybody actually wants to help. And when you work with that, people like me and everybody just get really engaged. I also sit in boards for voluntary sector. We don't get paid for that. But the energy and the efforts you make in it is so much bigger, actually, that I see, at least in some boards, because it's just personal. So the power and the potential to work on societal matters on people is a lot bigger than we think, and we have to catalyze that.
mm,
That's one, and the second is like that the facts about the world is not something that's easily understood. I studied business economy and in Switzerland. I did my master's. I learned a lot, and when you do that, you think you understand the world, right?
mm,
Because there's macroeconomics and politics and political science and everything. It's really interesting. But when I came to Sri Lanka, I just understand how much I didn't understand. The
mm,
impact of religion, right? How a Buddhist think. I'm not maximizing stuff, but actually, minimizing the input factors. Super interesting. And so there's so many things I just thought I knew when I was 30. I was like, no, there's so much more to explore. There's so many dimensions to the facts that you have to understand, and there's so many reflections on religion, on big leader that has an effect to you follow him. That just like is you have to really be curious and understand how the world works. You have to go into different areas, like
mm,
how actually is the Trump area working? How is people thinking? How is
mm,
Buddhism and other religions and Muslim religion affecting the people? What are they thinking? Because the logic behind it, what we think
mm.
is strange and crazy, there's logic behind it. And the more you understand that logic, you can relate to it. And if you can
Yeah,
relate to it, you can gather around it, and then you can engage people, either as being getting rid of poverty or climate change. But that
yeah,
journey is more broader, more difficult, and more interesting than I ever realized when I was like being the management consulting from Switzerland.
yeah.
It's a huge. The world is just huge and complex, but there is foundation for to join forces. But then we have to be all extremely curious to understand people in America that also Trump, that I don't do, but I have to respect
Mhm,
that. Muslim, much about Buddhism, who have a different way of thinking about doing business. We have to understand so much more than we do.
mm.
So that's, I guess, two of the findings or
Yeah,
things that I thought about.
that's very interesting. And but also, if we go back to your work and your experience within the industries, so you've been working as a consultant, but you've also worked and been responsible for sustainability in big companies. And I'm just curious, what has been your kind of general experience throughout the years? How has it changed? How has it kind of the journey evolved? Um,
Changed a lot. I think from a commercial perspective, I went into consultancy on sustainability way too early because
mm,
I did, build up the one of the first, I think, sustainability consulting practices in Accenture back in 20 years ago. It has changed since then. But I think that the interesting piece is back then, the facts was basically we knew a lot already then. So, and it was, you discussed in your intro, right? Compliance and all the demands around it. That wasn't there then. But
mm,
for the intellectual leaders, the interests about, what about circular thinking versus linear thinking? What does that mean for me? What
mm,
about climate change when that happens? What does that mean for me as opportunities and risks? Nature wasn't really on the picture then. Sometimes
mm,
also about, diversity. What does that affect? But maybe, the kind of climate change, the impact in smart cities, which connects it to the IT, or the impact on circularity, which really is affecting how we think about resources whatsoever. These things were interesting for many. So
yeah,
I got a lot of exposure on, Arendal or Lerkendal, or sometimes also a bit more international, because these topics were interesting for leaders to understand. And we
mm,
understood them a bit, and it was super interesting. And there's no compliance. It's just like, okay, I understand these are big trends and it will
uh,
affect us. So that was kind of the same, but because it was really kind of a high level understanding of the matters and so little experience and so little implementation through regulations, through real business opportunities, more conceptual opportunities. So you didn't have the technology, you didn't have many things. It ended by interesting strategic projects, strategy
mm,
projects. As we had a lot of good discussions, we had some strategy documents, strategy processes, but we have very few implementations. Maybe some in
mm,
the smart city space, some on circularity for industries, but it was difficult to get the big project. It was easy to get the conversations.
yeah,
And then it kind of evolved, right? So it got to be more, people understood more, we could have more discussions, energy efficiency made common, fully sense. Thinking about it, electrification made more and more sense to do, things like that. But then it really kicked off like 5 years ago when it started to come with really EU. EU started with their kind of the requirements, both on due diligence, but also on the reporting side.
yeah,
That was one side, and the second driver was both the EU with Horizon and Clean Deal, and then the US with the Inflation Reduction Act pumped billions of money into the new business side of things.
mm,
That also exploded in terms of sustainability, right? So, and it's, for me, sustainability are those two things. There's companies that should change. So that's kind of a sustainability role within a company. And there's a
mm,
whole new business
yeah,
coming out of circularity and renewable energy and batteries and all that matters, which is,
mm,
and these are kind of separate. One is the green industry and the second is transition of existing industry. So both of
mm,
these things happen. And the green industry exploded. I was part of Freyr batteries, but it was an
yeah,
exciting journey. It was a tremendous idea that would have been great if we realized
mm,
about building batteries, many factories, and the same is in solar, the same is in wind, the same is in other areas, and these things came as a bomb 5 years ago. A lot of my friends started working there, and that's been
mm,
really now reduced. So that's changed back into happening very little, at least in Norway.
yeah,
Whereas the kind of compliance piece, you see, like 5 years ago, everybody started hiring and getting into kind of understanding the 100 KPIs on sustainability, mostly climate, but also diversity and nature, etc. And I think that was a super important process, because actually people got involved and got knowledge, and we had people looking at it that have to think about strategically, what does that mean for me? The
mm,
negative side of it, of course, that everybody says now is that it was too much. It was so much information that
yeah,
didn't have capacity to understand what's important and not, and to drive those things forwards.
mhm,
And then Omnibus came from EU, which takes down the level of reporting, It gives people a bit of a kind of break, saying, "Oh, okay, now I don't have to stress that much." And I think now is the time where at least the good solid companies that have capacity and time and are smart are using that pause to combine the understanding of why it's important, the gathering of data that you've done in a compliance issue, just think about what actually matters and to work on that. But
Yeah.
most people, many companies still wait before they get
Yeah.
into that phase.
Yeah.
That's trying to put kind of some kind of thinking about what's involved in both the space of kind of building new business and transforming existing business, both from a
Yeah.
compliance perspective, but also on the things that actually matters in terms of risk and opportunities.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and it's a interesting way to put it, to kind of differ between these two ways of working with sustainability, I guess. Or yeah, and one of the issues that you're touching up on is compliance, and that is something that I think is very interesting, because obviously compliance is very important. But in my experience, what I've seen throughout my career and also talking to peers is that um, sustainability is often compliance driven in many companies, which means that sustainability becomes a checkbox, something that you have to do. It's a report, it's a lot of numbers that you don't necessarily understand, but you need to report on it. And then it becomes mainly a cost, and you kind of miss the huge opportunities that are really there if you're able to understand what sustainability really is, like you're referring to, and really use that to drive optimization or drive efficiency initiatives or new income streams or thinking smarter, designing smarter, which I've seen so many cases of. Um, what is your experience around this? Like the issue regarding the overly focus on compliance in the sustainability landscape?
No, I totally agree with your picture. I've been lucky that my jobs has been kind of more or less from the strategy space, being kind of a partner and asset for the CEO, the board. So kind of the whole starting point has been strategy, but my understanding is kind of sustainability trends and working with risks and opportunities. But when I work, we talked about ESOF, a great network, right? When you speak to sustainability leaders and when I work with them, I also had that role for 3 years. It's as you said, right? The job of being compliant and the risk of not being compliant is so important
Mm,
that the effort is probably mostly on that side, and the if we're just making it happen, just checking in the box, it's so big, it's so difficult job that also kind of the CFO and others are maybe just getting there, right? And that probably interferes with the most important stuff, which means that you have to kind of find a way to get the board and the CEO and the CFO, especially maybe the strategist, really to spend time on sustainability matters for their industry, because then they
mm,
will detect what's important and then they will work on sustainability, and the sustainability director wouldn't know, but it is actually driven out of, or the content of what you're doing is sustainability. So if I take an example from my own world, right? So I was first a consultant at Accenture, building up sustainability practice and doing that. So with a 10 people team for many years. And then to many people's surprise, I changed to a bit smaller company called Ruter, a public transportation company with only 2 or 300 people, employees, but they had a lot of suppliers. So the system is huge.
mm,
Um, and I was a strategy director that then became head of strategy that then also got a responsibility for sustainability. And when I came in there, like then I worked on a couple of things that I can talk about, which are, for me, the heart of sustainability for a public transportation company like Ruter 10 years ago. Then I started for
mm,
them. And the topics there were first of all, we worked on strategy. And then we talked about how to evolve. And we can then start talking about how to make sure we get efficiency out of the buses and we operate good. That's important, right? But the
mm,
main topic for us was digitalization,
yeah,
an app. And why is that? And that's the reasoning is like, okay, think about sustainability, is thinking about the purpose and role of the company. Is about how you affect society. And if you think about the role of a public transportation, it's, at least in the description that I know, it's not about, being efficient of driving buses. It's about creating a good mobility system for the city. Okay, and if you think about how to create a good mobility system for the city, what influences that? Well, how that influences how you and me travel. So how do you and me travel? Well, we plan it. How do you plan it? Through an app. You go into Google, you go into en reise, en tur, you go into Rute, you go into some app and you get some algorithms behind it that gives you an advice. And you get some prices and incentives to do that or that. Right? So if you do that through Google, which optimizes through you, or maybe converts on the, whoever sponsors Google, that it's a different result for you than if you do it through Ruter, which has the algorithms thinking about, Oslo as their primary owner and goal, and society as such. You avoid traffic and you, both things, right? So we saw that, for us to do our job, we have to be spending a lot of money and people on IT. On building app, and we have to say to our politicians, please allow us to spend so much time and money to compete against Google. So people go into Ruter app and order the journey, because then society will have a better place to be than if everybody goes into other apps, commercial apps, because they don't calculate, they don't have algorithms that should make a better society, right? So it's like a very high level strategic opportunity to work with, but it's societal driven, it's sustainability.
Yeah.
And the second was that the politicians wanted to be in the leading edge on electrification. So we started electrifying the buses. And that's also very, it's expensive, it's difficult, but at the end of the day, it will give a lot of advantages. And if we were the only one who drives diesel buses, while every car is being electric, it gives something about them, the back of public transportation. So that's the second, right? So it's a whole transition of the bus system, because you don't just change buses. You have to change everything, because they have to charge there, change the timing, change the competency. The fire people have to understand how to, make it turn out a fire on an electric bus. It's a whole transition that we went through before most others. And the third thing we worked on there is we understood what does public transportation or router has consequence on people with disabilities. Almost 20% of us, 1 out of 5, has some kind of disability. And we thought, without thinking about it, that we had a great impact on equality and embedding disabled people. And we did a study on that. We worked with a lot of disabled people to understand what the impact was, and it wasn't all good. It was sometimes negative, because our buses didn't manage to have a good service for people who didn't see, who sat in a wheelchair, etc. And because we didn't do that, they kind of didn't get into society, and they had to find different solutions. Sometimes we're part of actually getting them out of society, which is expensive and bad for them, bad for us, everything, right? So we had a huge project of working with them to understand a different business case, actually, for why the driver should help somebody to get into it, why we should have an app helping a blind person understand the bus is coming now. So all these 3 things are strategically huge, important projects, but they're sustainability related. And that's, for me, like the perfect case on how, with the right mindset, with the right trend understanding, with looking upwards, stakeholder, society, thinking about what it means for the company, driving huge change is actually the right way to do it. So that's like the non-compliant way to do it that I think are the right way to do it. But I understand people who have to prioritize compliant as well.
So to get to the place where you have the understanding and you have the people on board and it requires a bit of maybe like cultural change or like upskilling or having the understanding and the drive and the motivation and ownership within the whole organization. What is your experience with that? Like getting the entire company on board and to drive these changes and to drive these initiatives and strategic directions.
Yeah. It takes time, and it takes kind of C-level processes that are engaging and make sense. And what I also totally understand, if there's a company that has they have issues surviving, they are quarterly driven by stockholders that are wanting to get money out very fast. I totally understand how that's difficult from a sustainability perspective.
Mm.
But if a company is running good and they have capacity to think strategically, or if they have like a joint, if they're in the midst of a energy transition or something, then you automatically will be able to work on sustainability, right? Because it does take time, right? And it does take a strategist or a CEO guy or a smart sustainability leader to really go into kind of the strategy phase or the risk assessment or whatever, and like highlight something that is actually relevant. And then you have to take time to understand that, right? And the best way is sometimes to take them out. We in the Rute went to London to really see how some of those electric vehicles thinking was about. Or we went out together with disabled people. We sat in the bus in a wheelchair, understanding how that was. We had, you know, safaris with people with disability. We asked all the stupid questions we had. We were allowed to, because we had to break some barriers. So it took time. We took time to think about the process, and it took time to realize the process. Took management time, but only through that people really just not understood from a report, but they experienced the future, and they understood the future, and that created enough engagement, enough understanding, and want to drive changes to the organization. But that's like, so that's why a sustainability person have to be both a kind of strategist, a change enabler, a process driver, and you have to have a CEO, a board that, like, you know, wants to think long-term, holistic, and that believes like philosophy. If I work with other groups in society, and if I listen to them, I'll succeed more than I succeed if I going to be the most efficient person in the business. And you might succeed as well, but then, you know, you have to somehow have that wish and ownership to be a part of the ecosystem that gives and takes. If you don't have the mentality from the board or the CEO, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's very interesting how which you have been talking a bit about. I think this is also very important part of understanding, as you say, like the bigger issue or the bigger purpose or the bigger value creation that you address. And I think that in many cases, as you say, the stakeholder management is focused on maybe the shareholders or, you know, certain parts of the stakeholders, and you kind of miss out on, like you say, the societal part of it, or other groups of society that are affected and whom are very important stakeholders in your company. So I think that's a very, very interesting and very important part, that companies really are able to understand their stakeholders and understand their ecosystem and how they can really maximize value creation. So that's just a reflection.
Yeah, I totally understand. I think that's probably the most important process step, maybe within sustainability. When you do what is that called in English? The double materiality analysis, and you go and ask stakeholders, right? You often kind of go and ask and check the box. Well, should we care about climate change? You want us to care about climate change or nature or diversity? Climate change, check. Okay, why? Because you're a battery company. It makes sense, right? But that exploratory session with the same person, with the same company, like, okay, what do you ask them? What are you doing? How do you work with sustainability? Okay, so you have a product focus. So what do you think we should do? And going into dialogue, you will probably find in many times a strategic potential partnership that will benefit both of them. Because you both talk about things that are important that can break you or make you in the future. And you probably at some of those, you know, the suppliers, the customers will find definite things that make sense to collaborate on. And I believe that a lot of those, well, if you collaborate, the efforts of those two, you know, partners will become a lot better than if one of them is doing alone. So that's both for when we worked on strategy for Ruter, I had an external group of totally exciting people, like Kristin Skogen Lund, who worked for Finn, also top notch. And they volunteered to be kind of a reference group in a strategy. And they were totally honest. And we had a lot of focus on how to organize those sessions. How do I ask questions? How do I listen? How do you touch space strategically? And then we recorded that and we used that to talk to show to the management, to show to the board, and like, okay, so that's how we are from the outside in perspective. And that gave so much energy, enthusiasm, ideas on how to involve. So to think about why we should electrify and use a lot of resources, which is really difficult early, or why we should spend half of the resources on our company on an IT product. If you talk, the people in the street are owners, some of the suppliers, some of the competitors like Google or some of the other, then you get like you often like, yes, this is exactly the right thing to do. But if you talk to people internally, they have their heads totally buried in them to the task they're not able to do already. So they had to have the capacity and the curiosity to really see and explore the possibility. But the outside world will. And the better you do that, the better dialogue you have with them, the easier transition you'll have to get people to be on board of it. So it's like this ecosystem, it's like an orchestra, which is not just the people within the company, it's the stakeholders. And when this play together, it's a lot more fun and you get a lot better done.
Absolutely. It's so important. And now you're really also touching up on the next question that I have, that is in terms of the complexity around this transition. As you mentioned, like it's an ecosystem, and that's also from the perspective of navigating within this space. So you have the policies, you have the business aspect, you have the financial institutions or investors, and public-private collaboration, as you mentioned, also is a very important aspect. So now you also work in Shift, that is a network that is, I think you call the leaders within the climate transition or business leaders, which I think you do a lot of important work within this field. So from that perspective, I believe there are a lot of barriers, like both in terms of regulatory maybe challenges or barriers that are maybe making it more difficult to make the transitions that you need. I have a specific example of that where I used to work before, and I remember we had a talk with Shift also about, for example, the plastics, right? Currently, it's cheaper to buy virgin plastic than recycled plastic. It's things like this, and how the taxes work and how the regulations work, and all the complexity around that. How do you see this, and do you have any recommendation or encouragements in terms of how business leaders or companies can navigate within this space or get involved or be able to also contribute to making the changes that are needed in a way?
Yeah, it is complex. So I think I understand that we would want advice on that as a business leader. I think, the joining a club like or membership organization like Shift is not a bad idea, because then you have 70 top leaders that actually spend time on it together, and it's a good place to be there. They enjoy it, so they want to be there. And they talk about sustainability matters, and Shift is quite good at kind of finding topics and ways to discuss topics that actually is exciting. And that helps because I think working on sustainability as a leader is also difficult, because there's, it's still complex, it's expensive, it's high risk, it's long term, and you have to change the way everybody in your leadership works, and they're busy, right? So it's a lonely job to be on the top, finding out how ambitious you're going to be. You want to change the organization, and you want to bring them forward, but you want to break them, right? By having too much pressure on new ideas and whatever. So it's difficult. So I think my advice would be join forums like that. Spend time with others who have the same challenge, just to have partners to discuss where you stand in, as a person, as a leader. And then secondly, I think I would really, start by understanding the industry perspective. Because if it's 50 or 70% of the actual risks and opportunities, etc., are normally, I think, industrial, very similar. So if you're a battery company, the other batteries companies have the same. And sometimes it's the same as a solar power company or a wind power company. So trying to find a way where you have the best access to their risks and opportunities and trends, what's happening, what I have to be aware of, just to learn it very efficiently, I think is very important. And the third way to handle, I think, maybe complexity is to again do it, through partners. Like if you have a lot of topics they find interesting, and you want to explore them, you cannot put two people understanding that, study that for a year. You can afford that. But through that dialogue, we talked about like having dialogue with stakeholders, right? If you speak to your customer and two of those customers are really keen on having low CO2 emissions in some products, right? Then you have a possibility to make a transition within established business relations, right? That is less risky than doing it without. That's a customer side. If you have a supplier that you understand is hugely important to reduce toxic matters in their business, actually to have an impact on their suppliers on human rights, then make a partnership, right? To make the transition within a partnership, either it's the owner or it's the city you're in, it's the customer. That's very important. In Freyr, one of the good things we did was that we worked very good with the city, right? So we understood what they needed. They needed school. We needed education. They needed in your Harvard. We need access to, right? And if you do these things, then a difficult topic, either it's business related or sustainability related, are automatically easy to bring in and to handle because you have business friends who will work with you on it. So try to find those things that's very easy to collaborate on. Yeah, so that's maybe two. And the third thing is to again look at this from a business and sustainability perspective really fast and early, right? To really learn about a matter on, let's say, risk of that the earth in Norway are getting more easy to get destroyed and to do it on. And if you're a builder, you're a builder. This is business sensitive. There's a cost and risk. There's a sustainability matter. You need to understand that. And the people who works with insurance or who works with construction material needs to understand that. So try to match a business problem or business competence with the climate or environment or social matter task, and then motivate them to work together. If you go very generic too long, climate change. What is climate change? What does it mean to have 2.6 global warming? You're not fast enough to say that matters because your input factors are actually high CO2 matters. You might not be able to buy them. That might cost a lot of money in 3 years. So you have to have a direct. So the strategists have to have a quite fast link between a climate sustainability related problem and a business opportunity or problem. And that reduces complexity. But then the strategist or CEO have to do that quite fast, not spend half a year on it.
Yeah. And also like to just get started somewhere and to get some ideas and have an overview and understanding of the long-term opportunities and risks, even though it's like, okay, we don't have the perfect numbers, we don't know the exact certainties about anything, but to just get started and to get an understanding and have an idea, super important.
I totally agree. It's a very good point. Make a very small step first, and then you get into it. When you're into it, you can have those strategic discussions a lot better if you do it based on a report or based on a project proposal. Totally agree.
Well, thank you so much, Frode, for a lot of good tips and a lot of good case studies and examples. And it's really motivating and inspiring to hear about these companies that have been able to use sustainability as a driver to drive strategic direction and to create more value and to thrive as a company. I think it's super interesting to listen to you. And before we close up, I just have a last question for you, and that I like to ask all of the guests, and that is if you have any recommendations of books, or it could also be a video or a blog or something for anyone who would like to learn more about this space?
It's very difficult to give that because again, it's so like industry specific. But I think to be so boring, if you're a Norwegian company, try to read, for example, Lavutslippsutvalget, who made a report on how we need to do to reduce carbon emissions, or Zero, who's a climate change organization. And the reason why I say that is like we've reduced I think 12% in Norway until now.
Mm.
We have a target still to reduce by 55% in 2030. That's 5 years from now, and then now 70% with a bit of also buying some quotas in 35. So if you start imagining and reading and thinking about how society will be in 5 or 10 years, if we think we're going to make it, and I think we're going to make it, if not we have an issue, just
Yeah.
by starting there will trigger like, shit, this is important, this is huge, this is a transformation. And then you start thinking, what about the products I sell? What are the people I sell to? What are the input factors for my company? What about the owners of my stocks? What about the city I'm in this new society? So that simple task of reading what is actually the low carbon society that we need to have in already 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And then zero in 25 years. It's boring, but do it. And if you get into it, and if you're linear, you're gonna have some pictures in your head, and you're gonna have
Yeah.
some ideas. So go back to the basic. That'd be my idea.
Well, thank you so much, Frode. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing your perspectives and um, ideas and experience. So thank you so much, and we will talk again soon.
We will. Thank you, and good luck with your own business. I see it looks very promising, so I'm looking forward to following that as well.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.